My 9-year-old son Lauren had his appendix removed this morning. He had a basic understanding of the surgery, but the only hang-up he had was having to wear nothing but a hospital gown. No socks or underwear. When we got to the hospital room to get him prepped, he told his mom, my ex, and her sister, his aunt, to turn or to leave when he had to undress. Obviously, he was fine with my being there and needed help. After the surgery, my ex, her sister, her 13-year-old niece, my 18-year-old son and I were in the recovery room. We were waiting for Lauren to sober up and get discharged. He started to come to and whispered to me that he wanted to put clothes on because he wasn't comfortable wearing nothing but a gown in front of 3 girls. At that same time, a female nurse came in to get his vitals and was talking to my ex. I asked if they could all step outside so I could help Lauren get dressed. They looked bewildered at my request. The nurse then said she'd help me dress him because my son was still a bit weak. I said no thanks, my teen son will help out. She asked if I was serious by asking her to leave over this, and I said yes. My son doesn't feel comfortable getting dressed in front of 4 females. The nurse said she's been a nurse for years and has never heard of anything crass. I said you're comfortable, my son isn't, and you're being insensitive is what's crass and clueless. My ex said I was being dramatic. They left and my other son and I got him dressed. My ex called me and said that I owe her and everyone else an apology. I refused. I said if the roles were reversed, then you'd have a very different opinion. Also, Lauren has to take a bath for the next few days, and she was crazy if she was expecting Lauren to let her wash him or even be in the bathroom with him. It's different with me or his brother or friends, and I don't have to convince her for me to be right. To add, for the record, the gown he was wearing was made out of paper. It wasn't even cloth. My son was dying to get out of it. He was basically naked. I don't think my son would have minded a male nurse at all, but since my older son and I were there, the thought of requesting a male nurse didn't cross my mind. I don't know if they had a male nurse available at that moment because the nurse made a comment that they were short-staffed but all qualified. I wasn't going to argue with her over who got to put on my son's Minecraft underwear or zipped his hoodie. It's a waste of my time. She did mention how she didn't want him to get hurt with my dressing him, and I said then you best let me handle it because he'll fight you. Now for an update, I did have to take him back to the hospital this morning because he couldn't pee but had to. He was in a lot of pain. At the hospital, I asked if a nurse was going to see my son before or after his male doctor, and they said yes. I asked for a male and they said they'd ask the head nurse. She asked why it was so important to have a male nurse. I told her we can schedule an appointment to fight over it after my son sees the doctor. They did find a male nurse and my son was totally relaxed around him. The male nurse said a lot of female nurses take it personally when patients ask for a male nurse, and it's always been that way. Fortunately, my son didn't need a catheter and is fine. Now for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. That nurse was 100% out of line, and I'd personally say something to the facility about her unprofessional attitude. She needs to learn some empathy for her patients, regardless of their age. Your son was very clear in what made him comfortable, and there was no reason for her to question you as his parent and make that snotty comment. I'm just baffled that your ex and all the other females in that room thought it was appropriate for them to stay in a place where a 9-year-old boy was dressing. He deserves the same respect for his privacy as any adult, and damn skippy they'd be shooing any males out if he was a girl. I'm a mom to 2 sons, and it's boy mom 101 at that age that they want their dad or another male if they need help. The whole bunch of them should be ashamed of themselves. I hope your son is healing well and not the idiot. Comment 2. Not the idiot. Children too have the right to respect for their modesty from an early age. What's more, 9 is an age when children definitely don't feel like changing in front of a bunch of spectators. This nurse was very unprofessional. As a healthcare professional, she had to be made aware of the need to respect patients' modesty. This child was not alone. You were there to help him, so her presence was not necessary. Thank goodness you were there to be your son's voice. I really don't understand the reaction of those in the room. If I'd been there, I'd have been uncomfortable violating the privacy of a 9-year-old child, and I'd have immediately left. Your request was perfectly reasonable, and your son's privacy is very important. Continue to protect him. Now, for the update. Hey everyone, thanks for reading. So, after Lauren's follow-up visit to the hospital, things seemed to settle down for a bit. He was recovering well at home, and we were all trying to get back to some semblance of normalcy. But then, 3 days ago, things took a turn. Lauren started complaining about pain in his lower abdomen again. At first, I thought it might just be some residual discomfort from the surgery, but it quickly became clear that something was wrong. He was crying and couldn't even stand up straight. I called my ex to let her know what was happening, and she insisted on coming over. She brought her sister and niece along, which I wasn't thrilled about, but I didn't have the energy to argue. We rushed Lauren back to the hospital, and this time, I made it clear from the get-go that we needed a male nurse. The head nurse rolled her eyes but complied, and soon enough, a male nurse named Tom came in to check on Lauren. Tom was great. He talked to Lauren about Minecraft and superheroes, and Lauren visibly relaxed. The doctor came in, and after some tests, they found out that Lauren had developed an infection at the surgery site. They needed to keep him overnight for observation and antibiotics. My ex and I decided to take turns staying with him. I took the first shift, and she would come in the morning. Lauren was scared, and I could see the fear in his eyes. I tried to comfort him, but it was hard seeing him in pain again. That night, while Lauren was sleeping, I had a long conversation with Tom. He mentioned that he had seen a lot of cases where kids felt uncomfortable around female medical staff, especially when it came to personal matters. He said it was important to respect their feelings, even if it seemed inconvenient to others. This made me think about my ex and her reaction to the whole situation. Was I being too rigid, or was she being insensitive? The next morning, my ex showed up with her sister and niece again. I was exhausted and not in the mood for another confrontation, but it seemed inevitable. Lauren was still in pain, and the doctor said he needed another day of antibiotics. My ex started questioning the doctor about why this happened and if it was because of something I did or didn't do. I could feel my blood boiling, but I kept my cool for Lauren's sake. Later that day, while Lauren was napping, my ex and I had a heated discussion in the hallway. She accused me of being overprotective and making things difficult for everyone. I shot back that she was being dismissive of Lauren's feelings and that this wasn't about her or me, but about our son. Her sister chimed in, saying that I was making a big deal out of nothing and that Lauren would get over it. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. It felt like they were ganging up on me, and I was alone in trying to do what was best for Lauren. That evening, Lauren's condition started to improve, and the doctor said he could go home the next day. My ex and I decided to have a family meeting to discuss how we would handle Lauren's care moving forward. We needed to be on the same page, especially since Lauren would need follow-up visits and possibly more medical attention. During the meeting, my older son, who had been relatively quiet throughout this ordeal, finally spoke up. He said that Lauren had confided in him about feeling embarrassed and uncomfortable around the female medical staff and even around his mom and aunt. He said Lauren felt like no one was listening to him except me. This was a turning point. My ex looked shocked and her sister seemed taken aback. It was clear that they hadn't considered Lauren's feelings as deeply as they should have. We decided to set some ground rules. Lauren would have a say in who attended his medical appointments, and we would respect his wishes regarding who helped him with personal matters. My ex reluctantly agreed, but I could see she was still struggling with the idea. Her sister was less convinced but didn't push back too much. As we were wrapping up, my ex pulled me aside and apologized for not taking Lauren's feelings seriously. She admitted that she had been more focused on her own discomfort and hadn't considered how vulnerable Lauren felt. It was a small step, but it felt like progress. The next day, Lauren was discharged and we took him home. He was still weak, but in much better spirits. My ex and I managed to work together without any major conflicts, and Lauren seemed to appreciate the effort we were making. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. Looking back, I realized that this whole situation had brought up a lot of unresolved issues between my ex and me. We had always struggled with communication, and this was just another example of how our inability to see eye to eye affected our kids. But seeing Lauren's relief when we finally started listening to him made it all worth it. Thanks for reading. Am I the idiot for telling my friend to stop being dramatic about her mental health? I, 20-year-old female, have had 3 close friends in college. Grace, 21-year-old female, Matt, 21-year-old male, and Laura, 21-year-old female. Laura really likes using mental health terminology. She explores a lot of labels from those therapist influencers online. She was told that she has an anxiety disorder and depression, but that's the only diagnosis she's been given so far. Recently, she's been exploring autism and attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. Matt wanted to propose to Grace. They've been dating for a while, He's been planning the proposal for a couple of weeks, and while the proposal was very intimate between the two of them, I was very involved in scheduling the after-proposal event at a restaurant. The specifics of that are irrelevant to the story, but it was lovely, and Grace and Matt seemed really happy. Laura told us that she didn't want to be involved in planning the proposal because it reminded her of her parents' divorce. She said that she might come to the post-engagement party. Well, come the day of the engagement, and both Matt and I forget to check in on Laura. I don't think it's Matt's fault at all because he was occupied with far more important things, but I feel a bit guilty about not reminding her. She ended up not coming to the party. The next day, she starts posting online some dramatic, for lack of a better word, things about how it was traumatizing to see how little her friends cared about her, and that she'll be updating her followers on her trauma therapy journey. She posts that she's now in a really dark place and she thinks she has post-traumatic stress disorder. For context, I'm pretty sensitive to mentions of trauma and post-traumatic stress disorder because I was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder by a psychologist in my last year of high school after something that happened in my first year. I've felt a lot of guilt and shame around this because I spent a lot of time feeling that the thing that happened wasn't bad enough to count. I sometimes still get nightmares and flashbacks, but it's gotten better after therapy. I know that I have my own issues wrapped up regarding the word, and it bothers me a lot when people seem to throw the terms around without understanding their weight. But I also acknowledge that I can't stop the internet from doing its thing. I haven't told any of my college friends about this, so Laura doesn't know. At one point, she called me and started explaining how traumatized she is, and I finally snapped and said, "You're not traumatized. Stop being dramatic. You just got exactly what you asked for." Now, I feel guilty because I feel like I was a little harsh, and she's posting online, without my name at least, that one friend that she thought she could rely on to support her is hurtful and doesn't understand how being traumatized works. However, I feel like honestly, Laura's being very dramatic about an event that's not about her. I called my mom to see what her opinion is, and she told me that I could have reminded Laura about the party, and while my point is not necessarily wrong, I could have been more sensitive. So now I'm not sure how wrong I am. Now for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. Why would anyone need to check in on her on the day of someone else's proposal? She said she might come to the after party. It's up to her to decide if she'll come. OP, this is a friend who is going to require too much attention when it comes to the little things, making everyone miserable. Do not apologize, keep your distance, and re-examine what kind of friendship you want. Comment 2. So Laura was told about the party ahead of time, said she might show up, and went on not caring enough to ever follow up with anyone involved with it and just forgot? LOL. Not the idiot. She clearly didn't care enough to go. Now for the update. Hey everyone, thanks for reading. So 2 weeks have passed since that whole mess with Laura, and things have been pretty intense. Right after my last update, Laura decided to take a break from social media. She said she needed time to heal and reflect without the noise of online opinions. At first I thought this might be a good thing for her, but it also meant we didn't hear from her at all. Grace and Matt were busy with their engagement bliss, and I was left feeling a bit lost and guilty. A few days into Laura's social media hiatus, I got a call from her out of the blue. She sounded calmer than before and asked if we could meet up to talk. I agreed, hoping we could clear the air. We met at a small cafe near campus. Laura started by apologizing for her dramatic posts and admitted that she might have overreacted. She said she was feeling really overwhelmed and didn't know how to handle her emotions. I apologized too for snapping at her and not being more understanding. It felt like we were making progress, but then Laura dropped a shocker. She told me she had been seeing a new therapist who suggested that she might have borderline personality disorder, BPD. This was a huge revelation for her, and she said it made a lot of sense of her past behaviors and feelings. She explained that her intense reactions and need for validation were symptoms of BPD, and she was starting to understand herself better. This was a turning point for me too. I realized that maybe I'd been too quick to judge her without understanding what she was going through. Meanwhile, Grace and Matt were planning their engagement party, and they wanted to make sure Laura felt included this time. They asked me to help them come up with a way to make her feel special without overwhelming her. We decided to have a small, intimate gathering at Grace's apartment, just the four of us. We thought it would be a good way to reconnect and show Laura that we cared about her. The night of the party, Laura seemed genuinely happy to be there. We talked, laughed, and reminisced about old times. At one point, Laura pulled me aside and thanked me for giving her another chance. She said she was working hard on managing her emotions and understanding her triggers. I could see she was making an effort, and it made me feel hopeful about our friendship. But things took another turn a few days later. Laura called me in tears, saying she had a huge fight with her parents. They didn't believe her new diagnosis and thought she was just seeking attention. This brought up a lot of old wounds for her, and she felt completely unsupported. I tried to comfort her, but it was clear that she was struggling. This made me think about my own issues with my parents and how they had reacted to my PTSD diagnosis. It was a painful reminder of how difficult it can be to get the support you need from the people closest to you. In the midst of all this, I started having more frequent nightmares and flashbacks. The stress of dealing with Laura's situation was triggering my own PTSD symptoms. I realized I needed to take care of myself too, so I reached out to my therapist for an emergency session. Talking things through helped me gain some perspective and reminded me that it's okay to set boundaries, even with friends. One evening, while I was studying in the library, Matt showed up looking really upset. He confided in me that he was having second thoughts about the engagement. He loved Grace, but he was worried about how their relationship would change after marriage. He was also feeling guilty about not being there for Laura during her crisis. This was a side of Matt I hadn't seen before, and it made me realize that everyone was dealing with their own struggles. Grace, on the other hand, seemed oblivious to Matt's doubts. She was busy planning their future and talking about wedding details. I didn't know how to bring up Matt's concerns without causing more stress. It felt like I was caught in the middle of everyone's problems, and I didn't know how to help. As the days went by, I started noticing patterns in Laura's behavior. She would have moments of clarity and calm, followed by intense emotional outbursts. It was like she was on, interesting of emotions, and it was exhausting to keep up. But I also saw how hard she was trying to manage her condition. She was attending therapy regularly and even joined a support group for people with BPD. It was clear that she wanted to get better, and that gave me hope. One night, Laura called me and asked if I could come over. She sounded really distressed, so I went to her apartment. When I got there, she was sitting on the floor, surrounded by old photos and letters. She told me she had been going through her parents' things and found a letter her mom had written to her dad before their divorce. The letter revealed that her mom had been struggling with her own mental health issues for years, and it made Laura realize that she wasn't alone in her struggles. This was a huge moment for her, and it changed her perspective on everything. She said she felt a new sense of empathy for her mom and wanted to reach out to her parents to try and rebuild their relationship. This revelation also made me think about my own family and the things we don't talk about. It made me wonder if there were hidden struggles and secrets that I didn't know about. It was a reminder that everyone has their own battles, and sometimes understanding those battles can help us heal. In the end, these past 2 weeks have been, interesting of emotions and revelations. Laura is still on her journey of self-discovery and healing, and I'm trying to be there for her while also taking care of myself. Grace and Matt are working through their own issues, and I'm hopeful that they'll come out stronger on the other side. It's been a challenging time, but it's also been a time of growth and understanding for all of us. Thanks for reading. Am I the idiot for being furious at my husband for leaving me alone during surgery? And ignoring my calls, I am a 25-year-old woman, and my husband, who is 27 years old, and I have been together for almost 4 years. We do not have any kids. I had a same-day lumpectomy surgery yesterday. The tumor is not believed to be malignant, but I wanted it out since my mother had breast cancer. My husband got the day off work and drove me. The surgery was delayed for about 3 hours, and my husband was getting impatient. The surgeon finally came in and said she expected the surgery would take an hour. After she left, my husband said he was going to leave the hospital to get lunch when I went under since he hadn't eaten that day. I wanted him to be able to eat and was trying to be brave, but I really didn't want to be left when the surgery was only supposed to be an hour. So I asked him if we could pick up food for him on the way home. He gave me the impression he would stay, and I was wheeled away. Fast forward to 30 minutes later, I was being shaken awake by a nurse who told me I was sick, and she was trying to get in touch with my husband. Apparently, during the surgery, my blood pressure dropped rapidly, and my surgeon was able to get the tumor out in 20 minutes. My blood pressure was 70/30 by the time they got it out, and my lips had turned blue. I was very sick in my room. I was bleeding through my internal stitches, coming in and out of consciousness, and was vomiting. All the while, my nurse was trying to track my husband down. My surgeon called him, but he did not answer. I'm very thankful for the sweet nurses who took care of me and reassured me. It is the next day now, and I'm very emotional and angry about the whole ordeal. My husband did not apologize and has been incredibly defensive about the whole thing. His explanation for leaving was, I went out and got lunch, and then I was getting gas because I was low from driving your butt around. The surgery was supposed to be an hour. How was I supposed to know your heart could have stopped? I told him he had one job, which was to stay with me and tell me what the surgeon says. I could get over him leaving if he was apologetic or remorseful, but I'm shocked at his words and how little he seems to care for someone he claims to love. In his defense, he cared for me last night when we got home, but left today after we argued. I'm sure I'm just still really emotional from anesthesia and being a bit dramatic, but I can't even look at him the same. He is usually attentive and caring, so I am baffled. I'm sure he thought the chances of anything going wrong were slim, but I can't understand his thought process. I sat for hours and hours in waiting rooms during all of my mother's breast cancer procedures and was nervous to even leave for a minute to get food. God forbid I don't have cancer because I don't trust him with anything medical now. Anyway, I'm unsure what I hope to get from writing this to strangers. I just needed to vent. Now for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. Not the idiot. I had a tumor removed in March. My friend drove from 2 towns away and picked me up, waited with me from 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. when my surgery was delayed, stayed the entire time, was with me in recovery, argued with the nursing staff that was trying to send me home with 0 pain meds because there wasn't a prescription for any, and drove 45 minutes at 10 p.m. to the only 24-hour pharmacy in my state and got me home at midnight. My friend did this. Your husband is awful, and this is grounds for divorce, in sickness and health. He cannot be trusted in an emergency. Don't waste your life on someone who values you so little. I'm so sorry you have to go through this, and I hope your results will be benign. Comment 2. Married man here, not the OPs. OP, the only reasons I would leave the hospital in a situation like that is if I had to care for our 3-year-old. You said you're childless. He has no leg to stand on, no defense, and I'm deeply shocked on your behalf. His behavior is inexplicable. And as for the comment about driving your butt around, a massive WTF to that alone. How dare he feel inconvenienced by taking you to the hospital for an operation? Edit for a PS, hope you get well soon from an internet stranger. Now for the update. Hey everyone, thanks for reading. So after my last update, things have been pretty tense between my husband and me. The day after our argument, he left the house early in the morning and didn't come back until late at night. I spent most of the day resting and trying to process everything that had happened. My emotions were all over the place and I couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal. When he finally came home, we barely spoke. He went straight to bed without even asking how I was feeling. The next day, I decided I needed to talk to someone about what was going on. I called my best friend and told her everything. She was shocked and couldn't believe how my husband had acted. She suggested that I take some time for myself and maybe even stay with her for a few days to clear my head. I thought about it, but I wasn't sure if leaving would make things better or worse. Later that evening, my husband and I had another argument. He was still being defensive and refused to apologize for leaving me at the hospital. I told him how hurt and scared I was, but he just kept saying that he didn't know anything would go wrong. I couldn't understand why he couldn't just say he was sorry and show some empathy. It felt like we were talking in circles, and I was getting more and more frustrated. The following day, I decided to take my friend's advice and packed a small bag. I told my husband I was going to stay with her for a few days to clear my head and think about everything. He didn't try to stop me, which hurt even more. As I was leaving, he finally said, "Do whatever you need to do." It felt like a punch to the gut, but I knew I needed some space. Staying with my friend was a good decision. She was incredibly supportive and helped me see things from a different perspective. We talked for hours about my relationship and what I wanted for my future. I realized that I needed to have a serious conversation with my husband about our marriage and what we both wanted moving forward. On the 3rd day, I went back home to talk to my husband. I was nervous, but I knew it was necessary. When I walked in, he was sitting on the couch, looking lost in thought. I sat down next to him and took a deep breath. I told him that we needed to have an honest conversation about our relationship and what had happened at the hospital. To my surprise, he finally opened up. He admitted that he had been scared and didn't know how to handle the situation. He said that he felt guilty for leaving me and that he had been trying to avoid facing his feelings. He apologized for not being there for me and for not showing empathy when I needed it the most. It was the first time I had seen him so vulnerable, and it made me realize that he was struggling too. We talked for hours about our fears, our expectations, and our future. I told him how important it was for me to feel supported and cared for, especially during difficult times. He promised to work on being more present and attentive, and I promised to communicate my needs more clearly. It felt like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders, and I could see that he was genuinely trying to make things right. Over the next few days, we both made an effort to rebuild our trust and strengthen our relationship. My husband took time off work to be with me and help me recover. He was more attentive and caring, and I could see that he was trying to make up for his mistake. We spent a lot of time talking and reconnecting, and it felt like we were finally on the same page. During one of our conversations, my husband shared a story from his childhood that helped me understand him better. He told me about how his father had always been emotionally distant and how he had learned to bottle up his feelings as a result. It made me realize that his defensiveness and lack of empathy were not because he didn't care, but because he didn't know how to express his emotions. It was a turning point for both of us, and it helped me see him in a new light. As we continued to work on our relationship, I also took some time to reflect on my own feelings and fears. I realized that my anger and hurt were not just about what had happened at the hospital, but also about my fear of facing a potential cancer diagnosis alone. I shared these feelings with my husband, and he reassured me that he would be there for me no matter what. It was a comforting thought, and it helped me feel more secure in our relationship. In the end, our experience brought us closer together and helped us understand each other better. We still have a lot of work to do, but I feel hopeful about our future. I know that we can get through anything as long as we communicate and support each other. Thank you for reading. If you like this video, you'll probably like these too. Also, while you're here, please consider subscribing. It's your support that keeps this channel alive and allows me to make better and longer videos. Have a great day.